In this video, we're going to do a walkthrough of how you can create a request for information process, specifically one that relates to privacy information through processes such as GDPR and CCPA. We're going to break this walkthrough into two parts. The first will cover how to create the request form. The second will cover actually building the workflow that will automate this process for you using Nintex Workflow Cloud. If you would like to get a copy of this process, we do have one available within the Nintex Process Accelerator Gallery. You can find this at gallery.nintex.com, and if you select Workflows and Nintex Workflow Cloud, you can scroll down and find our CCPA request information process. While you can then import this workflow directly into your tenant as a starting point, in this video, we're going to go ahead and start designing the form and workflow from scratch. Before we start automating this process, it's important that we know where we're going to be storing our data. In this example, we're going to be using a SharePoint list within SharePoint Online for Microsoft 365. Let's go ahead and jump over there and take a look at the list configuration now. So here in our SharePoint Online site, as you can see, we have our privacy request list. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the list settings and see what columns we have set up here. On this list, we have a variety of different columns, and you'll notice that they're really broken into two main parts: agent fields and contact fields. The reason for this is that for many of these processes that request for information, they can be executed by an agent on behalf of the customer. And so we want to be able to facilitate that need on our list. As you can see, these are all single line of text columns, and so it should be pretty quick to get set up in your own environment. Once all of the columns have been created, this is the list where our data will be flowing from the Nintex Workflow Cloud workflow. And so we can see these various different columns that will be populated once people start submitting the request forms. The reason that we're using Nintex Workflow Cloud for this process is that it allows us to have an anonymous form that we can embed in our website so that users don't have to sign in to your site or to your SharePoint environment to be able to submit these requests. If we select the Start event, and then Form, we want to make sure that we update our configuration to give access to anyone with this form URL. We can then select Design Form. Here in the Nintex Workflow Cloud Form Designer, we use a very easy drag and drop interface so that we can start building these responsive forms. The first control that we're going to utilize is the label, which will hold the title of our request form. Let's go ahead and grab that and drag it onto the canvas. We'll give it a name of title, and then we'll give it the text of Consumer Privacy Request Form. We also want to make this a little bit bigger, so let's go ahead and give it a heading format. The next step is that we actually want to provide some instructions to users on how they can use this form. So we're going to use a couple different label controls to present that information to the end user. I already have some text that I'm going to go ahead and paste in here. If you would like a copy of any of the text that's used in this form today, feel free again to check it out in the Nintex Process Accelerator Gallery. The second label control will actually be more information about our authorized agent and who constitutes an authorized agent. But we want to make this so that people don't have to see it the entire time they're interacting with the form. So we're actually going to leverage a feature of the group control to host this information. Let's go ahead and drag a group onto the canvas, and then we'll go ahead and grab a label and embed that within the group. We'll go ahead and call this group Authorized Agent Information, and then we'll set the show header to yes. We'll go ahead and give it the header text of what is an authorized agent. And then we want to give that header a background, and we want to make it collapsible so that once the user has read that information, they can collapse it out of the way. In our next label, we'll go ahead and give it the name of Authorized Agent Definition. And then again, I'm going to go ahead and throw in my definition text that I have predefined. After our labels, we'll go ahead and add a yes/no control. And this will be the indicator as to whether or not it is an authorized agent that is filling out this form on behalf of a customer or the customer themselves. And we'll also want to customize the name property, as this is what the variable will be called that we're using later in the workflow. We'll also go ahead and update it from a checkbox to a toggle to make it a little bit more obvious as to what their input is. Next, we're going to add a couple group controls to the form. Group controls allow you to nest other controls within them and then allow you to interact with all of those controls at the same time using rules later in your form. The first group will go ahead and update the name to Authorized Agent Fields. And our second group will go ahead and update to our Customer Request Fields. Within our Authorized Agent Request Fields group, we want to present the ability to enter a first name, last name, email address, phone number, and then their address. To do this, we're going to use a variety of different control types, so let's go ahead and drag some of these onto the canvas. We'll go ahead and start with a couple text short controls, which will capture our first name and last name, and then we have a dedicated email control that we'll use to capture the email address. We will also add another text short control for the phone number, and then several different text short controls for capturing our address and zip code. However, the one difference is going to be our state control, that we actually want to be a choice so that we can make it a little bit easier to standardize the information that's being entered into our form. We can then go ahead and update these control names. And as you see, when you update the control name, the name property, again, that will be used as variables later in the workflow, automatically updates for us. To make sure that we're collecting data in the right format, we can do things like add input validation. For example, with our agent phone control, let's go ahead and add a text mask that will make sure that data is entered in the right format for our phone number. After adding our text mask, when we preview the form, we can see that the form now presents the data format to the user correctly. For our state choice control, I actually already have a list of all the different states abbreviated in comma-separated values. I'm going to go ahead and copy those in, and then we'll update this from a radio button into our dropdown and set our please select to yes. With our initial fields configured, we also want to add a file attachment control that will be used to capture the signer's authorization documentation. We then want to provide a choice control that will let the agent select the type of request that is being made. Once we've provided the various different request types, we now need to provide some fields so that the agent can actually input the customer's contact details. Similar to how we've formatted our agent information, we'll go ahead and use the same type of fields to create our contact information that the agent can fill out. We'll also make sure that we add our contact verification document file upload control so that the agent can upload the request from the customer. And finally, we'll add a label with a couple more instructions for validating this authorization. Then, to make our form design a little bit cleaner, we'll go ahead and nest this customer contact information up inside of our agent request. This will make our rule design a little bit easier in the future. And with that, we've completed the agent request portion of our form. Now we're going to add another group that will hold the actual user information if they are submitting the form without an agent. This will look very similar to the agent and contact information that we did earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to that being completed. Awesome. Now that our form is done, let's go ahead and take a look at the preview and make sure that things are working the way we expect. And so we can see here all of our information about an authorized agent. We can go ahead and collapse that out of the way. But it looks like our is this request being completed by an authorized agent really doesn't make any changes to the form yet. To introduce logic into our request form, we need to start leveraging rules. So if we go into our rules, we're going to hit Add New under Form Rules. We'll go ahead and give this rule a name of Show Agent Fields or Customer Fields. And then we'll set the if request being completed by an authorized agent is yes, Then our authorized agent fields visible is yes, and our customer request field is visible no. This will make sure that the authorized agent field is showing when the customer field is not, and vice versa. But to complete this, we need an else, which will keep our logic in the other direction as well. And so in this case, our authorized agent field visible will be set to no, and our customer request will be set visible to yes. Now when we preview the form, we should see some changes in the field when we update our yes/no field. And it looks like our rule is working as expected. We'll go ahead and apply those changes. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the first part of our walkthrough video. In the second part of this walkthrough, we'll go ahead and start looking at how we can automate this process using the information that was captured in our request form. Look forward to seeing you there.